Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're zeroing in on Stellar Lumens, XLM, specifically looking at investing potential in 2025 and 2026.
Yeah, exactly. And our mission here is really to give you a solid handle on how you might approach XLM investment during that time frame. We've sifted through quite a bit: investment outlooks, YouTube chats, even a study guide.
Okay, let's unpack this. We'll start with Stellar's basic purpose, then look at what might actually fuel its growth. And crucially, we'll walk through the practical stuff: how you'd invest, keeping it secure, maybe earning a bit extra, and definitely the risks involved.
Right. So first off, Stellar's core mission. What's it all about? Essentially, the network's built to link up banks, payment systems, people, global.
For faster payments, right? And cheaper ones.
Exactly. Fast, cheap, cross-border payments. They really emphasize accessibility, especially for populations that maybe don't have great access to traditional banking.
So it's less about, replacing everything and more about connecting things.
Yeah.
Bridging the gap between old finance and blockchain.
That's a good way to put it. Real-time transactions, bridging traditional finance. It does feel a bit different from some other cryptos out there.
And our institutions actually using it.
We're seeing increasing signs, yeah. Financial institutions exploring it, projects tokenizing assets, think gold, stable coins right there on the Stellar blockchain. So yes, that practical use is growing.
Okay, that's the foundation. Now the really juicy part. What could actually make XLM, pop in 2025 or 2026? What did the sources point to?
Well, one potentially huge factor is central bank digital currencies, CBDCs.
Ah, yeah. Heard a lot about those.
Right. Stellar has actually been involved in some pilot programs already, and the thinking is by 2025, maybe 2026, we could see major governments launching their own CBDCs, potentially on networks like Stellar.
Wow, okay. If that happens, what would that mean for XLM?
Well, it could seriously drive up demand for XLM, the network's token, right? If central banks are pushing transactions through Stellar.
Like massive volume.
Exactly. Massive volume, plus it adds a layer of, legitimacy and institutional buy-in. It could be a game changer.
Okay, CBDCs are one big potential catalyst. What else? Existing partnerships came up, didn't they?
Yes, definitely. Don't underestimate the scaling potential of partnerships they already have. Companies like MoneyGram, Visa.
Big names.
Huge names. They're using Stellar for cross-border payments, even microtransactions, making them cheaper, faster. As those integrations get deeper, get used more day to day, that's real-world demand for XLM. Practical stuff.
It's not just speculation then, it's actual utility driving it.
That seems to be a key theme, yes. And then there's the broader market context, of course.
You mean like a potential crypto bull run?
Precisely. We can't ignore market cycles.
Yeah.
Historically, after a Bitcoin having the next one's expected in 2024, there's often been a wider market upswing. A rising tide lifts all boats, sort of thing.
So if history rhymes, 2025, 2026 could see a surge across crypto, potentially boosting altcoins like XLM along with Bitcoin.
It's a pattern we've seen before, driven by Bitcoin supply mechanics and overall investor mood. Definitely something to keep in mind.
Okay, so let's say someone listening is thinking, all right, I'm interested. What are the actual steps to invest in XLM over the next couple of years?
Well, the most straightforward way is buying it on a crypto exchange. That's how most people do it.
Which exchanges are generally recommended?
The sources consistently mention the big, reputable ones. Coinbase, Kraken, Binance are usually top of the list.
Although Binance availability can be tricky depending on where you live, right? Regulations.
That's a very important point, yes. Always check regional availability and the rules in your area. Bitstamp and Bit2Me were also mentioned as reliable options.
Got it. So pick an exchange. Then what? Account setup.
Yep. Create an account. You'll almost certainly need to go through verification, KYC, know your customer, standard procedure, uploading ID, that sort of thing.
To prove you are who you say you are?
Exactly. Then you need to fund the account. You can usually use regular money, like dollars or euros, via bank transfer or card, or sometimes deposit other cryptos you might already own.
Okay, account funded. Now the buying part.
Right. You go to the trading section, find XLM. You'll see trading pairs like XLMUSD or XLMBTC.
Meaning you're buying XLM with US dollars or with Bitcoin.
Correct. Then you place a buy order. You can usually do a market order buy at the current price, or a limit order where you set the specific price you're willing to pay.
Okay, seems pretty standard for exchanges. So you've bought your XLM. Now, how do you keep it safe? That's always a huge concern.
Absolutely critical, especially if you're holding for the long term or have a significant amount. Security is non-negotiable.
What's the gold standard, according to the sources?
Hardware wallets. Overwhelmingly recommended. Think Ledger, Trezor, these are physical devices.
Why are they considered so much safer?
Because they store your private keys offline, completely disconnected from the internet.
Private keys.
Yeah.
Those are like the password to your crypto.
Essentially, yes. They grant access and control. If they're stored online, like on an exchange, or even sometimes in a software wallet on your computer, they're potentially vulnerable to hackers. Hardware wallets keep them isolated. Think of it like a vault versus just a locked drawer.
Makes sense. Are there other options besides hardware wallets?
Yes, software wallets exist. These are apps for your computer or phone. The sources mention Stellar's own Lobster wallet, also Trust Wallet, Solar Wallet.
And how do they compare?
They give you more control than leaving crypto on an exchange because you hold the keys. But because they're still connected to the internet in some way, they're generally seen as less secure than a hardware wallet. Sort of a middle ground.
And leaving your XLM just sitting on the exchange where you bought it? Convenient maybe, but risky.
Generally considered the least secure option for long-term storage, yes. There's that saying, not your keys, not your crypto. If the exchange gets hacked or goes bankrupt or freezes withdrawals, your funds could be lost or inaccessible.
Okay, so the bottom line is, take control of your keys if you're serious about holding, and guard those keys like gold.
Absolutely never share your private keys or your seed phrase with anyone, ever.
All right. Beyond just buying and holding XLM, did the sources talk about ways to potentially earn yield on it by, say, 2026? Passive income opportunities?
They suggested the landscape might evolve, yeah. More platforms could potentially offer ways to earn on your XLM.
Like staking. I hear that term a lot.
Staking was mentioned. Now, Stellar's own consensus mechanism isn't typical proof of stake, but platforms built on or integrating with Stellar might offer rewards for locking up XLM to support certain network functions. So yes, staking-like rewards could become more common.
Interesting nuance there. What else besides staking?
DeFi decentralized finance. Participating in lending protocols on Stellar's DeFi ecosystem. Stellar X was mentioned as a platform in this space.
So you could lend out your XLM and earn interest?
That's the idea. You provide liquidity to lending pools and earn yield. But, and this is important, DeFi comes with its own risks. Smart contract bugs, protocol risks. It's not risk-free yield.
Definitely something to research thoroughly before jumping in. Okay, let's talk strategy. Any smart ways to approach investing beyond just picking an exchange? Rules of thumb.
The absolute #1 rule, the golden rule you hear everywhere for crypto.
Yeah.
Never invest more money than you can genuinely afford to lose.
Cannot stress that enough. The volatility is real.
It absolutely is, which leads to another strategy. Dollar cost averaging, or DCA.
Right, investing fixed amounts regularly.
Exactly. Maybe $50 or $100 every week or month, whatever fits your budget, regardless of whether the price is up or down. Over time, it averages out your entry price and reduces the risk of putting all your money in right at a peak. Take some emotion out of it.
A more disciplined approach. And what about staying informed? Avoiding scams?
Crucial. DYRR, do your own research. Always, always DYRR. Check Stellar's official website, their official social media for real updates. Be incredibly wary of get-rich-quick promises or anyone creating intense pressure to buy now. If it sounds too good to be true.
It probably is. Solid advice.
Yeah.
Now we have to cover the flip side. The risks. What are the big ones for XLM?
Well, as we just mentioned, market volatility is huge. Prices can swing wildly. You need to be prepared for potentially steep drops, not just climbs.
What about external factors? Governments.
Regulatory risk is definitely a factor. Governments are still figuring out how to handle crypto, new rules, stricter regulations on exchanges. These could impact the market, sentiment, accessibility. It's an evolving landscape.
And Stellar isn't the only player in this space, is it? Competition.
Not at all. It's a very competitive field. The sources specifically mentioned Ripple, XRP. That's an obvious comparison given the focus on payments, but also others like Algorand, Solana. They're all innovating.
And even the CBDCs we talked about as a potential catalyst could also be competitors, right?
Absolutely. If governments launch their own digital currencies effectively, that could compete directly with networks like Stellar for payment volume. Plus, new blockchain projects are always emerging. Stellar needs to keep innovating to stay relevant.
And the security risks we talked about earlier, hacks, theft, those are ongoing threats too.
Yes, always present. Which just loops back to the importance of secure storage. Using those hardware wallets, being careful with your keys, it's fundamental.
Okay, risks noted. Let's touch on something people always seem fascinated by. Price predictions. What did the sources say about where XLM might go in 2025, 2026? And how seriously should we take these?
Right, price predictions. You see them everywhere. It's vital to take them with a massive grain of salt. They are highly speculative.
But what kind of numbers were being thrown around? Just for context.
Sure. For 2025, the ranges were pretty wide. Some sources suggested lows around littles and 21 cents. Others saw potential highs up near 70.50, even $81 cents. One or two were even more bullish, mentioning figures up to $1.44.
That's a huge spread. What about 2026?
Similar variability. Some analysis pointed to an average around $0.47, maybe peaking near $0.71. Others were much more conservative, suggesting ranges more like 0.11 cents or 2.11 cents up to maybe $0.21 or $0.22.
So basically, nobody really knows for sure.
That's the takeaway. These are just forecasts based on current data, algorithms, and sentiment, all of which can change rapidly. The actual price depends on so many things: market conditions, adoption rates actually materializing, regulations, competition. It could be way higher or way lower.
So focusing on the why, the fundamentals, the catalysts, the risks is probably more useful than getting fixated on a specific target price.
Exactly. Understanding the project, its potential, and the risks is far more valuable. Some sources did mention potential support levels, maybe around $0.22 and 30 cents as zones to watch if the price dips, but again, those aren't guarantees, just areas of historical interest.
Okay. So bringing this all together as we wrap up, final thoughts on Stellar for 2025, 2026.
Well, Stellar definitely has an interesting niche, trying to connect traditional finance with blockchain. That focus makes it stand out and worth watching, especially over the next couple of years.
So what does this all mean for you?
What's fascinating here is the confluence of traditional financial systems exploring blockchain through CBDCs and the established network of Stellar being a potential conduit. This raises an important question for you. How do these macro trends align with your own investment timeline and risk tolerance?
Right. How does it fit your picture? And that brings our deep dive on Stellar Lumens for 2025-2026 to a close.
We really hope this discussion, drawing on the different sources, gives you a good starting point. But please, do your own thorough research before making any decisions. Dig deeper yourself.
Absolutely. And remember, we have to say it again, cryptocurrency investing involves significant risk. Never, ever invest more than you're truly prepared to lose.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Given Stellar's focus on real-world payments and bridging financial systems, what other global trends or tech advancements, maybe things we haven't even touched on, do you think could really move the needle for its adoption and value in the years ahead, beyond just price trends?